welcome to this new video. My name is Eric Patterson. Today, I'm going to introduce Jenkinsfiles for you. So on this lesson, we are going to introduce Jenkinsfiles. And then as you can see here, the title is Introduction to Jenkinsfile for Beginners. There will be another video that will be like a more advanced level with Jenkinsfile, where we put like parameters and put condition on the Jenkinsfile, or we use like some like difficult syntax that you usually see on the Jenkinsfile. Without any further delay, let's dig into it. Now, the good question that we need to ask ourselves is that what is a Jenkins file, right? So we can just say the Jenkins file is just a text file, right? It's just a text file which contain instruction, right? It's text file which contain like a pipeline instruction. We contain like a pipeline stages, and you take that Jenkins file, you put on your source code or root on either Bitbucket, GitHub, or GitLab. And Jenkins will read that Jenkins file to actually execute all the stages and all the action that they have actually requested, right? So a Jenkins file is just like a simple text file that you will place into your root directory. And there's like a structure that you need to follow. And Jenkins will be able to read that structure and execute exactly what you want him to do, for example. Now, type of Jenkins file, right? It's good that we talk about the type of Jenkins file. Technically, there are two types of Jenkins file. We have the declarative pipeline, all right, the declarative Jenkins file, which is the most easier one. And you also have the scripted, right? The scripted type of Jenkins file. So I mentioned earlier the declarative Jenkins file, and also we have the scripted pipeline. So those are the two types of Jenkins file that we have. Now, let's dig a little bit into the declarative pipeline. Now, the structure of the declarative pipeline, right? The declarative pipeline has a structure for example, right? It's like it has more rigid structure, predefined structure. But to be honest, it's pretty simple. And the structure is just made, for example, you have stuff there like pipeline, you have stuff like agent, you have stuff like stages, and you have stuff like step, and then you have stuff like post, right? So those like the traditional structure after you are going to have, for example, on the declarative pipeline, but it is super easy. Now we have the scripted pipeline, which doesn't have the same structure. For example, right, it offers more flexibility, more powerful way to write Jenkins file. That's like the scripted one, but in terms of between the declarative pipeline and the scripted pipeline, the most used is actually the declarative pipeline because it's easy. I myself, I found it very easy, but it's not flexible, right? Compared to the scripted pipeline, it's not flexible. If you're somebody that knows yourself to really be into programming, you will find out that the declarative is not flexible as the scripted pipeline. Now, if we have to choose, right? If you have to choose, for example, if we have to choose, for example, between the declarative pipeline and the scripted pipeline, right? Well, if we have to make a choice, or maybe like if you have to like make a decision, when it comes to the declarative pipeline, right? It's recommended for something that is simple, right? Straightforward, right? If you want to do something simple, straightforward, you can go ahead and use the scripted. But sorry, you have to go ahead and use the declarative pipeline. But the scripted pipeline is preferred when you need more control, right? More control and flexibility. If you need more control and flexibility in terms of like for complex pipeline, you will use the scripted. So just to recap, so for simple pipeline, for example, you will declarative pipeline. If you need more control for pipeline that are complicated, right? If you have like you want to write pipeline that are complex and complicated, but you will have more control, you will go with the scripted. But for something that is real simple, you can go ahead and just use the declarative pipeline. But both are stored in the source control, so it doesn't matter what type of pipeline you have. Like I mentioned earlier, you have to store that on the source control, and especially in the root of the directory. If you don't store it on the root of the directory, when you're configuring the job in Jenkins, you need to tell Jenkins exactly where is the location, because the pipeline process is actually reading from there, right? Jenkins will read every single line of the Jenkins file, either scripted or declarative, to go ahead and actually build the pipeline. Now, the language that the Jenkins file the language that the Jenkins file will use It is similar to JSON, but it's not JSON. The language that Jenkinsfile uses is actually Groovy, right? Jenkins uses a Groovy language. It's really simple. Groovy is simple. If you know, it uses like a lot of curly bracket. For example, it's simple and it uses like a lot of curly brackets. Now, in terms of like output, right? For example, the Jenkins file, right? What do you have as an output on the Jenkins file, right? When you write the Jenkins file, you supply it into your source code management, the root of your source code management. And when Jenkins go ahead and read that Jenkins file, what do you have as an output, right? So when Jenkins go ahead and read that, what do you have as an output? So as an output, you're going to have what is called a Jenkins pipeline, right? You're going to have a Jenkins pipeline, which is just a way of getting stuff automated, right? You're going to have a Jenkins pipeline, which is just like I mentioned earlier, a way of getting stuff automated, right? So, and this is like a sample Jenkins pipeline here. So that's a sample Jenkins pipeline. As you can see here, it has stages, right? This stage, for example, is coming from Jenkins, and this is like the post stage we talk about, but you can see here the initialize stage, the build stage, the step, the test, deploy. All these are coming from the Jenkins file. All these are being read from the Jenkins file. Now, the location I was talking about, the location of the Jenkins file. So usually what we are going to do is that the Jenkins file is actually located, right, in the where the source code is located, right? For example, we have here, as you can see here, the source code is located here. So if there, like you put your Jenkins file exactly where the source code management is actually located, can go back and basically show you that. So the source code, you put it where the source code is actually located. So this is our Jenkins file here. In terms of the structure, right, of the Jenkins pipeline, right, structure of the Jenkins pipeline. So we have this, that's just a structure. For example, checkout, build, test, staging, prod. It doesn't mean that the naming is the same, but that's just like a structure, or it doesn't mean that it has to follow this. It depends on the type of project that, for example, you are having, right? It depends on the type of project that you are having. We are going to dig more into the Jenkins side so that you understand bit by bit what is needed and what it is for. Now, traditionally, this is a traditional Jenkins file, and this is a declarative, right? This is a declarative. So this video will focus more on the declarative pipeline, and there will be a follow-up video for the scripted pipeline. So this is more on the declarative pipeline. So traditionally, we are going to have a Jenkins file like this. So this is a traditional Jenkins file. It can be shorter than this. It can be longer than this, right? This is just like the traditional Jenkins file, right? Now, let's jump into the detail, right? Time for detail. So let's go to the detail and try to see how we can understand all this. Now, let's start by constructing a Jenkins file from scratch, then I will explain. So we are talking here about the structure of the Jenkins file. So a Jenkins file has a parent structure, for example, that's called a pipeline. As you can see, it has curly bracket, and inside you are going to put the pipeline configuration, right? It's called a pipeline, right? It's pipeline. You open the bracket here. Now, the pipeline is just the main block that contains everything, right? The pipeline is that's just the main block that contains everything, meaning that everything that we are going to write, every step, every sequence that we are going to write will be in between these two brackets, right? That's what I mentioned earlier, that it was just like JSON. That's something that deal with multiple brackets. And also, I want to emphasize that this pipeline block is mandatory, right? The pipeline block is actually mandatory. So you cannot have a Jenkins file without this. Jenkins will fail if it doesn't see this. So it is mandatory. Now, inside the Jenkins, inside the main bracket, we are going to add the agent. The agent here is basically what? The agent here is actually the build executor that Jenkins need to use, right? The agent here is actually the build executor that Jenkins need to use. And we say here the agent any, meaning that Jenkins can use any build executor. As you guys know, Jenkins has a built-in executor, like the built-in agent, for example, right? The built-in agent. So the built-in agent is just the agent that comes in default with Jenkins by default. I have external Jenkins agent that can be used. For example, you can have like a static agent called node, or you can also have a dynamic agent that Jenkins can create at build time. Now, when you say agent any, if Jenkins will pick up any agent, for example, meaning that Jenkins will pick any agent that accept. You can also have this structure here where you give the label for the agent, right? Have this structure here where you give the label, for example, for the agent. That is where the agent has a label set, right? And the label has a label set, and also a label was actually configured to only accept job matching the label. You have to call the agent. So for anything, so that's the second line on the pipeline, right? So you have to put the agent, can be any, or you can basically put the agent and specifically specify the label that your agent is going to have, right? So like I was mentioning, the agent just tell Jenkins, right? This flag that we call agent, just tell Jenkins, for example, which build agent, which Jenkins agent you need to use to basically go ahead and run the job. Then I want us to pay attention into something. As you can see here, the agent configuration is actually located inside the pipeline. So this is the pipeline bracket, and the agent is located. So the agent is located inside the pipeline because the pipeline here is the main parent, right? Pipeline here is the main parent, and the agent is actually what is located inside. I want to pay attention. The agent is also mandatory, right? It is mandatory to have an agent. You can either have agent here, any. You can also have agent none if you want, or you can also have agent label like this. But at least you need to call the agent. It can be any. It can be none. Next thing that we are going to talk about, for example, we have something called option in Jenkins. So we can add options, right? Option will be, for example, stuff like build discarder, disable concurrent build, timeout, timestamp, and there are multiple type of option. Now, that's just a definition of option. That's just a feature, right? Help Jenkins set up the job with the feature, right? Like timeout, timestamp of the build and everything. But I want you to notice something that the same we did for agent. Actually, option is located under the pipeline. So the option is located under the pipeline. This time around, the option is not mandatory. The option is actually optional, right? So meaning that it is not mandatory to have option, right? It is optional. So you don't have to use option all the time. It just depends on what you're trying to achieve. But so far, the main pipeline block is mandatory, and this agent here is mandatory. But when it comes to the option, it is not mandatory. Now, let's see what is the option, for example, in Jenkins, right? Let's see what is the option, for example. In Jenkins, you have these options. Options are basically everything that is under general, right? Like I say here, these are options. All these are options. You see, for example, here, discard all build, do not allow concurrent build, do not allow this. So these are this element here, right? Whatever is under general is actually the option, right? So if you go to the job, if you are familiar with Jenkins, when you go to general, you basically have options. And they are optional as well. Now, the next thing that we are going to talk about is the build trigger. We are all familiar with build trigger. We can also add build trigger, right? We can also add build trigger. And build trigger we just element that we trigger Jenkins with the build, like just element that ring Jenkins to go ahead and start building. Just element that trigger the job, right? We are going to give build trigger. And if you are familiar, for example, with the Jenkins console, you will know exactly what is a build trigger, for example. And I want you to notice as well that the build trigger is located on the pipeline, right? The build trigger is located on the pipeline, like same as agent, same as option. The build trigger is also located on the pipeline. That's why I mentioned earlier that pipeline was actually there, the main parent. And the build trigger block actually is optional, right? It's not mandatory. You don't need to set the build trigger. Even when you are on the console and you are clicking to create your jobs and everything, you don't have to use build trigger. It just depends on what you are doing, for example, right? You don't have to use build trigger. There's a separate video where I talk about the build trigger. If you go, for example, to DevOps Easy Learning YouTube channel, you will see a video which I did for build trigger, where I basically explain all the build triggers that we have. Talking about build trigger, if you go to the Jenkins console, build trigger, these are exactly what I was talking about, right? These are build trigger that we set as infrastructure as a code, pipeline as a code. So these are build trigger. If you are familiar with the Jenkins console, this picture is coming from the Jenkins console, and that's the build trigger, and it's Australian as well. The next thing that we are going to talk about is parameters, right? We can set parameters as well. Parameters are just input that a user, like that's the way that users supply input to Jenkins at build time, right? Parameters are just a way for user to supply input to Jenkins at build time. Then I want us to also pay attention and notice something, that parameter, same as trigger, same as option, and same as agent, is actually located under the main pipeline, right? It's also located in the main pipeline. And the parameter block is optional. It is not mandatory. So far, the only mandatory element is agent, right? Everything here from option to trigger to parameter, they are actually optional. Let's construct, for example, parameters, right? We have a string parameter here. I can add a Boolean parameter. I can add a choice parameter. I can also add a text parameter. Then I can also add a password parameter, right? All those parameters are just help define, right? Help define parameters for user, right? Those are just elements that user will actually input into the pipeline at runtime. And there are multiple type of parameter: Boolean, choice, text, password, file. So there are multiple type of parameter. You have another one called the string parameter, which is here the most. But so far, the most used parameter are the string parameter and the choice parameters. And I just want us to pay attention is that all parameters are only actually located under parameter. If you look at the string parameter here, I separate the color, the Boolean parameter, the choice parameter, the text parameter, and the password parameter are located inside parameter, and parameter itself is located inside the pipeline. So the position of each one is very important. So parameter is a parent of all these parameters. And that is optional, right? Like I mentioned earlier, that is optional. Let's dig more into parameter. On the Jenkins console, you are going to see parameter here. If you go to the Jenkins console and click on the general, and you click on this project is parameterized, you'll actually be able to see all these parameters. So that's just an equivalent of this, but in the Jenkins file, we can script that. Of course, they are optional, like I mentioned earlier. The next thing that we are going to add here after parameter is environment. That's how we create environment variable. So to create environment variable in Jenkins, using Jenkinsfiles, you can use environment and you can create environment variable. And there's no limit on the number of environment variable that you can put inside environment. So you can put as many as you want. So environment variable are just, something like setting an environment variable that Jenkins can use. And when you set an environment variable here, that environment variable can be used in all stages, right? Because if you create an environment variable inside a stage, that environment variable will only be used inside a stage. But if you create that environment variable here with this option called environment, that will be used and that can be consumed by all the stage. And I also want us to notice that the environment variable is actually located under the pipeline, right? Same as the agent, the trigger, the parameters. The environment variable is also located inside the main pipeline. It's located inside the main pipeline. In Groovy, the position doesn't matter. There's no indentation on Groovy like YAML. If you're familiar with YAML, in YAML, there's like indentation that you need to follow. But in Groovy, you don't have to follow that indentation. But to write neat code, it's always good to put them in the same position, right? You have to write neat code, have to make your code easy for other people to read, but not only you. Variable is also optional. You don't have to set variable. It just depends on the use case that you want to do. But so far, we have covered all the elements that are optional. So we have covered the option, which is optional. We cover the trigger, which is optional. We cover the parameter, which is optional. We cover the environment, which is optional, meaning that you don't need this. You may or you may not need one or more of this, right? You don't really need it. So only thing mandatory so far is just the agent. So far that's the only element that we have that is mandatory. Now, let's keep digging into the Jenkins file. So the next thing that we are going to talk about is called stages, right? And stages are actually where we define all the stage. It is just a block that we use to define all the stage. And I also want you to pay attention. Stages is located under the pipeline itself. Now, stages is mandatory, right? Stages is mandatory. If you want to use stages, that's going to be mandatory. Stages is mandatory. Now, the next element that we are going to talk about, so far, two mandatory elements, agent and stages. Now, the next element that we want to talk about is actually stage, right? It's actually stage. Of course, we say stages with S, and then we say stage, meaning that in English, stages, we mean that we have multiple stage. So always make sure that the stage has a name, right? The stage must always have a name. You cannot have a stage without a name. Now, stage are just, a block of code that contains step, right? And also notice that stages is not located inside the pipeline, but stages is located inside stage. So far, we have the pipeline here in black. We have agent located inside pipeline. We have stages located inside the pipeline, but we have stage. The stage is located inside the stages. So I put the color for you to see, and every single stage must have a name. It is mandatory, right? Now, you need at least one stage, right? A pipeline will need at least one stage, right? A pipeline will need at least one stage under stages. You cannot have 0 stage under stages. That's what we are having. We said S here. So you need at least one stage under stages, and it is mandatory. Why? It is mandatory. The stage name is also mandatory, right? The stage name is also mandatory. So you need to have at least one stage under stages, and the stage name is mandatory. If I want to recap, you have the pipeline. Agent is located inside the pipeline, under the pipeline, or let's say inside the pipeline. Stages is located inside the pipeline, and stage is located inside the stages. And you need at least a stage. It is mandatory to have at least a stage inside stages, and it's also mandatory that every single stage have a name, right? Now let's move into the next thing, right? Let's move to the next thing is step, right? We have step, and as you notice, step are just block where we can run our command. It's just like a shell, for example, right? Step are just block where we can run our command. And then I also want you to pay attention to see that step is actually located under stage. So step is located under stage. So stages is located inside the pipeline, and stage is located under stages, but step is located on, sorry, let me start over here. Stages is located inside the pipeline. Stage is located inside stages, and step is located inside stage. So you have stages, stage, step, and the stage name should be mandatory. Stages is mandatory. The stage is mandatory. You need at least one stage per stages, and we have step. Also, you need at least one step per stage, right? Because it is mandatory. You need at least one step per stage, but usually people just only use one step, right? Usually people only use one step. You don't need more than that. I don't think that you will be able to even use more. So it's only one that you can use. I haven't seen two. It's only one here that you can use. If you want to recap stuff here, as you can see, our main pipeline starts with pipeline, followed by the agent. These are mandatory stuff. Then we have stages. Inside stages, we have stage. And inside stage, we have step. The next element that I want to cover is this SH, right? Inside step, if you want to run a command, you start with SH, right? Inside step, if you want to run a command, you start with SH. Remember, it is SH. Then you put 3 quote. You go at the bottom also, you put 3 quote, and you're going to put whatever you want to run as command in between here. And also notice that sh is located under step. So we have the pipeline, the agent is located inside the pipeline, stages with S is located inside the pipeline, so it's located inside the pipeline, stage is located inside stages, step is located inside the stage, and we have the sh triple single quote, bottom triple single quote, that's located inside the step. So that's the sequence that you want to follow. Now, also I want you to understand that the sh block is mandatory, right? The sh block is mandatory actually, right? The sh block is mandatory. Now, I just want to recap again. We have pipeline, then we have the agent that is mandatory. We have stages. Inside stages, we have stage. Inside stage, we have step. Inside step, we have sh. And inside sh, we can run every command that we want. And note that we run the command inside the stage. So the command should be constrained inside the sh. So the command are constrained inside the sh, and you can run as many commands as you want. So technically, it is mandatory to have at least one command, right? It is mandatory, at least one command, right? It is mandatory to have at least one command. Now, also, let's go ahead and, for example, run few commands on the stage. I can run the first command, echo. I can run the second command as ls. I can run the third command as pwd. Then I can run another command as uname. So you can put down this command. Like I said, indentation is not important in Groovy, but if you want to write neat code, it's good to use, put for example, all the mandatory elements inside the pipeline. It's good to line them up, right? And also it's good to line all the stages up. For example, like when it comes to like command, it's good to go ahead and line them up. So now notice that command is inside sh. All the commands are actually located inside sh. It is mandatory that to have at least one command, right? It is mandatory to have at least one command per stage. You can run any command. It can be any shell command, right? It can be, you can run any shell command. It's going to work. Now, let's try, for example, to construct a Jenkins file right now with the element that we have. So we start with stages. So let's put the stage. Then I want to emphasize before we put the stage is that we can have multiple stage under stages. So we can have multiple stage. The stage name must be unique. The stage name must be unique. You cannot have two stages with the same name, right? The stage name must be unique. You cannot have two stages, for example, with the same name. Same as you cannot have two cars with the same VIN number. You cannot have two cell phones with the same VIN number, the IMEI number, right? Good. Now, let's add the first stage. We are going to call that stage verify. And inside that stage, we are going to run the command echo, welcome to DevOps Easy Learning. Let's go ahead and add another stage. We call that stage build images. And let's go ahead and add another stage. Call that stage push images. As you can see, this is a simple Jenkins file. We are running 3 commands in 3 stages. And I want to re-emphasize that at least one stage is mandatory, right? It's mandatory to have at least one stage. Now, I want to re-emphasize on something. You may go out there and see something like this, right? So let's put this. You may go out there, you will see sh quote, you put the command, or you will see something. Now, if you see sh quote, you put the command. You can do this, but remember, if you want to run 10 commands here, you will put sh here 10 times, right? And this when you say sh single quote, you put here, that just sh single quote, that's just when you want to run like simple. That's just for like simple, you want to run like a simple command. But hey, take the burden out of you. Have the habit of running sh triple quote. You go to the bottom, you put triple quote, and inside you can put everything that you want. So this is the most suitable way to write it. So you have sh, not sh with a single quote, the command, but have sh with 3 single quote. You go at the bottom, you put 3 single quote, and you can do anything that you want. Even if you want to run one command, it's better to keep that habit on the long run. Most of the time, you will barely see one command on the stage. Always good to use the triple quote. Most of the Jenkins file that you will see that it has the triple quote. Let's jump again into another aspect. So I was saying that it's good to go ahead and have this. Then I want to reemphasize one thing. Now, another part of the Jenkins file. So far, we cover agent any, or we cover the agent, we cover option, we cover environment, for example, we cover parameter, we cover trigger, we cover stages, we cover stage, we cover step, we cover sh, and we cover the commands that goes inside sh. Now, another block of Jenkins file is actually called the post. Posts are like post action that Jenkins need to take. Like at the end of the build, what your Jenkins do. So these are posts are actually elements that happen after the build, right? Post action in Jenkins are actually the element that happen after the build. Like most of the time, as post action, we might ask Jenkins to go ahead, for example, and notify us through Mattermost or notify us through Slack. Those are the post action. So post action are basically what happened at the end of the build, right? It has nothing to do with the build. For the post action to happen, the build must be successful, right? Meaning that all the stages must be successful before we can reach the post action. So the post is just like like there was a post, right? Something that happened after, right? So the post is actually what happened, right? The post section here, for example, I put a little definition here, like the post section define action to take upon completion of the pipeline execution, right? You can have multiple items that can go there, going from like notify when the build pass, like success, failure, for example, unstable, abort, clean up, notification. So there are a lot of stuff that can go under section, under the post section. Now, I want to notice something, right? Post is under the pipeline. The post is not under the stage. So I want to reemphasize this. Say, notice that post is located inside the pipeline and not stages. Because most of the time, especially for beginners, I've noticed throughout this year, beginner will go ahead and try to put the post session under the stages, and it's not going to work. So the post, you will notice something. Usually when you have posts, after the curly bracket of the post, you will see the last curly bracket, which is actually the main pipeline. So it means that the element that is actually located inside the main pipeline, directly in the main pipeline, are the agent, the stage, and post. These are the elements that are located there directly. Now, you have to know that the post section is optional. It is not mandatory. So you don't have to have a post section, right? Only stages, only agent stages are mandatory. And inside stages, we have stage that is mandatory, step that is mandatory, and sh also that is mandatory. But post is located under the pipeline. It is not mandatory. Now, you can have a post like failure. Basically, you are asking Jenkins to go ahead and send you a Slack message in case of failure, right? Something happened in terms of failure. Let me know by Slack. By Jenkins can notify you through Slack. Jenkins can notify you again through email. So you will be up to the configuration that you want him to do for you. Now, at least one post action must be defined, right? At least one post action must be defined. If you decide to use post, you need to define at least one post item or action, right? You need to define at least one post item. Post is not mandatory, of course, but if you decide to use post, you will have to put at least one post item, right? And that is mandatory. One more time, post itself is not mandatory, but if you decide to use post of your Jenkins file will require post, you will have to supply at least one item of the post. Now let's go ahead and construct posts. For example, now I want to emphasize that we can have multiple post item or action, right? Under the post block, we can have multiple, and at least one is mandatory, like I mentioned earlier. We can have multiple post item, and every single post item is unique, right? You want to have like a unique name. So when you give him a unique name, every single post item is unique, and you cannot have the same name, right? One with the same name. So let's construct a little bit for success. For example, for like a Slack, if you want Jenkins to notify you when your build is successful with Slack, you are going to have something like this. If you want Jenkins to notify you, for example, when the build is unstable, you have something like that. If you want Jenkins to notify you when something fails, you have something like that. If you also want Jenkins to go ahead and clean up, right? Like delete the build directory, you will have something like this. And there are multiple post condition or post item that you can use. If you go to the Jenkins file documentation, you will see all that. Like I said, and then I want to emphasize, we have at least one post, and it is mandatory. So if you decide to use post, it's not mandatory, but if you decide to use post, at least one should be mandatory. Now, one thing that we want to see again is how to comment out, right? We know that, for example, in bash script, for example, or in YAML to comment out something, we use the hash or the pound sign. But what about in Jenkinsfile? How do we comment something in Groovy, right? Because Jenkinsfile use Groovy. How do we comment something out in Groovy? In Groovy, unfortunately, we don't use the pound sign. We are going to use actually double slash, right? And you can comment out any line, right? Now, you can only comment line that are not mandatory. So here I can comment out, for example, this comment. If I pass this sign here, it will not go ahead and read it. So that's not going to be read. If I go ahead and comment out this, I can also comment out an entire stage. If I comment out an entire stage, that stage is not going to run, right? If I comment out an entire stage, that stage is not going to run. Sometimes we just want to comment out stuff. We don't want to delete them, or we just have to comment out. So to comment out, it is double slash. You use double slash and not the pound sign. I know in multiple languages, for example, the bashers create like a YAML. For example, if you want to comment out something, you will go ahead and put the hash sign or the pound sign, but in Groovy, you will have to use double slash. Now, the next thing that I want us to see, like, for example, like, let's compare, right, between declarative and scripted pipeline. I said this was focus more on the declarative pipeline. The next video, we focus on the scripted pipeline. But let's compare. I have a sample declarative pipeline here. We are familiar with this. And we have a scripted pipeline. As you guys can see, there's a difference. In the scripted pipeline, it starts with node. The scripted pipeline starts here with node. The declarative pipeline starts here with pipeline here. In the declarative pipeline, you have to tell Jenkins which agent to use. It is mandatory. Here, you don't see any agent. Then you have stages, stage, step. Here, you only have stage. You don't have stages. So you go directly with stage here, right? So that's just like the main difference, as you can see, between the scripted and the declarative pipeline. Of course, every single stage has a name here. It must be different. At least that's something that they have unique. I hope you like this video. I will see you guys next time with the next video. I will also make another video on the scripted pipeline, which I will go ahead and dissect bit by bit the scripted pipeline. I hope you learned something throughout this video. If you like it, go ahead and subscribe. If you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe. You have to encourage us. And also see you guys on the next video. Thank you.